5 years here in the Quad Cities is a federal requirement for all metropolitan areas over 50,000. The area that we're planning for is shown here on the map, and the darker area is the metropolitan area. Bi-State serves a 5-county area, Scott and Muscatine counties in Iowa, and Rock Island, Henry, and Mercer counties in Illinois. We do some work in Whiteside County for transit planning as well. And we do some regional planning for rural Scott County and all of Muscatine County. But our focus with this plan is inside the metropolitan area. Bi-State is a metropolitan planning organization, so we're a federally designated area. We're also considered a TMA, a transportation management area, so areas over 200,000 would have that designation. Our commission is the board that adopts our long-range transportation plan, but they do delegate the authority for programming transportation dollars and preparation of this plan to the Transportation Policy Committee, which is made up of elected officials from the metropolitan area, as well as some transit representation as well. And then there's a variety of advisory groups that also assist in the plan development. Federally, as a requirement of this planning process, it should be comprehensive, coordinated, and continuing. And so this slide shows we start out with a vision and goals, and then we move to identifying what those priorities might be, and then working towards implementing those priorities, evaluating the projects that actually get constructed, and then eventually working back through the process again. How well did we do? This is the third of 5 public information meetings, and we appreciate your attendance here today. We will have one tomorrow at East Point and East Moline, and the final one will be on June 13th at the Rock Island County Office Building, which is also our offices. We will also have a public hearing as part of the Transportation Policy Committee, which is scheduled for June 21st at noon. There have been also a number of other public involvement opportunities throughout the process. Our most recent were about a year ago, where we solicited input on what people wanted for the Quad Cities as far as our transportation system. The plan goals are really part of an update process. Bi-State Regional Commission started in 1966, and as part of that, one of our roles was to do transportation planning for the metropolitan area. So the goals and objectives have been refined over the years, and they support quality of life for our metro area. The performance objectives are also outlined in the plan, and just very quickly going through a few of these, again, supporting, making sure our transportation system, the network that serves us, supports our economic vitality, promotes efficient system management operations, and a key element is preserving what we have, as well as increasing our mobility and access. Part of the plan is identifying who do we need to be mobile for. We're a 2-state area and have over 20 communities within that. The population of Scott and Rock Island counties is over 300,000, and the metropolitan area itself, so that smaller geography, is just over 290,000. So a number of these kinds of statistics that are in the plan, on average, based on census information, you can get pretty much anywhere in the Quad Cities in about 18 minutes. Again, to support the economic vitality of our metropolitan area, we've outlined information on who are our employers. Part of the roadway transportation and transit systems are to serve people live to get them to work. And so we have three primary sectors in our economy, as well as we've outlined our top employers, the Rock Island Arsenal being the largest. So moving goods and people is how we use our transportation and how it serves us, and where people want to go, where they want to work and live is the other piece of that, so the supply and the demand. As part of our transportation planning process, we develop a model using travel demand software, so we project what the trips are going to be. And we have, as part of that, information that goes into that travel demand model to predict those future trips. So we have projections on population between 2006, which is census information. We've projected that by the year 2040 we would increase population moderately based on historical trends up to about 89,000 people, so in 34 years. And then for employment, we would anticipate about 47,000 additional employees in the next 34 years. When we analyze this information, we actually do it geographically as well as statistically. And so what you see here is the population and the employment based on our traffic analysis zones. And those are geographies that would contain households, population, employment, employment by industry, employment by retail, and other groups. And so here it's the total population and the total employment. And what I like to point out is that we've got the interstate loop here, and the darkest colors are the most dense per square mile. So as you can see with population, we're still fairly well contained near our metropolitan core. And then with employment, the centers are a little bit more scattered, but again, still along our metropolitan core. We have a pretty robust transportation network. When they talk about a multimodal system, we have our roadways with 4 interstates, a number of U.S. highways, and state highways that serve our metropolitan area. We have 3 fixed route transit systems and 2 rural transit systems. We have 1 commercial airport and a general aviation airport. And we have 2 national trails crossing our area, intersecting at the Rock Island Arsenal at the Government Bridge. So we've got the American Discovery Trail that goes east and west across the United States, and then we have the Mississippi River Trail that goes north to south, obviously along the Mississippi River. We're also served by rail and barge transportation. So we're very well positioned from an economic development perspective to take advantage of transportation logistics here with the variety that we have. Kind of cutting to the chase, the highlights of the long-range transportation plan are these priorities. The Quad Cities continues to support I-74 Mississippi River Corridor reconstruction as its highest priority. And that corridor goes from 53rd Street interchange at I-74 to Avenue of the Cities. There are a variety of widenings, road widenings identified in the plan. We've got John Deere Road as well as Kimberly Road. There are also some additional reconstructions at the Kelowna Road I-80 interchange to improve both the roadway and create an overpass to bypass the railroad. There's a lot of congestion in that particular area of our community. And then ultimately to close some of the gaps of our regional and national trails. One of the requirements of the federal Highway and Transit Administration is to look at whether or not a plan is fiscally constrained. We are projecting about $3.6 billion in revenues over the years based on historical trends that we have received in the past. And we are projecting just over $3.6 billion in revenues. So we actually have more need than the money that we're projecting in the future. Although a little hard to see, the main part of this is that for that 3.6 does not include I-74. I-74 is another $1 billion. And we have secured already $85 million towards the project. It's a year and a half into a 3-year contract for the final construction design. Engineers are working on construction staging and are getting that project ready so that when we do secure funds for the corridor, we can move forward very quickly. I want to note Lincoln Bridge, because it's a corridor project, it's been split into 7 projects. Lincoln Road is a project that's already been completed. So we can say 1 of 6 projects has already been completed on the corridor. And the second project is reconfiguring the interchange of 53rd Street, which is currently underway. So we have 2 projects that are already in the works or done towards the total project overall. The central section is the largest piece of that project. It would be about just under $1 million if we were to construct it. Just over $1 million if we were to start in 2015. And the engineers are value engineering the project. Generally, a project like this would take about 8 years to construct. They've compressed it down to 5 years so that they can reduce the cost of the project. Some of the network priorities, as I mentioned, were to maintain what we have. About 75% of the revenues that we're projecting for roadways improvements would go to maintaining our existing system. So about 25% of that would be put towards new capacity, the widening of roads, making something go from a 2-lane to a 4-lane, paving a gravel road, those kinds of projects. In addition, there are technologies that can be introduced to our transportation system, and you may have seen those driving around, the dynamic message signs that will help direct travelers, and folks will be able to go to websites and be able to check out how the traffic is flowing. So there's in-pavement sensors and those kinds of things that provide information to the traveler and help reduce congestion. This is the future roadway priorities. A lot of colors on here, but the key colors are yellow being those roads that we're expecting to be 6-lane facilities. The solid lines are projects now through 2020, and the dashed lines are projects that are expected in long range from 2021 to 2040. So as you can see, I-74 corridor is a bigger expansion corridor. It's in the heart of the Quad Cities. The bridge carries over 70,000 vehicles per day. And then John Deere Road is another project that's slated for expanding to 6 lanes. Kimberly Road is also one of those corridors. The blue are projects that would go to a 4-lane facility. And then the green are those that are expected to be 3 lanes. So you've got 2 travel lanes and then a turn lane generally in the center. The Quad Cities is committed to looking at other alternatives as well. So it's not all about expanding the roadways here in the community. It's making sure that where it makes sense, that streets are complete, that they serve our transit riders, that it serves the walkers and the bicyclists. So depending on the context of the location, what are the needs of that corridor, our Complete Streets policy recommends to our local jurisdictions that they look at those features as they're updating and reconstructing certain corridors, and they want that considered as part of the design process. Non-motorized transportation would be bicycling and walking, and so in the plan we've outlined what the ideal trails network would look like. We're proposing close to 300 miles of trails, hard surfaced, multi-use, and non-motorized trails. So these would be separated and shared paths, so your bike lanes, those kinds of things. And currently we have over 100 miles. So if the plan is implemented throughout, we'd see about 400 miles of non-motorized transportation network if it's able to be funded and all is said and done. So this map shows the non-motorized trails. The purple, and we do have maps in the back that show this, that you can take a closer look. But again, the solid lines are what we would expect in the short term, and the dashed would be in the long term. And again, we're trying to complete gaps for our Mississippi River Trail and American Discovery Trail, which actually here in our area run pretty much parallel. We also have identified a sidewalk inventory to show where sidewalks are on both sides or one side or not. And as you can see from the map, I think the takeaway is the red lines are where they're not located. So really in the core part of our metropolitan area where, again, we've got the densest population, that's where we have a fairly robust sidewalk network. And this is illustrating those sidewalks down to what would be considered collector roads. So again, this doesn't go down to the level of your neighborhood road where there may or may not be sidewalks. Then we have our transit systems. We've outlined that we have 3 public transit fixed route systems: Bettendorf Transit, Davenport City Bus, and Metro. We also have 2 rural systems. Riverbend Transit serves the Iowa Quad Cities and areas beyond that, and RIM serves rural Rock Island and Mercer counties, and they provide transit service from the rural areas into the metro area where connections with the fixed route system can be made. Right now, there are about 4.5 million unlinked rides in the Quad Cities per year. And so the next slide shows what our projections are for the future. So currently we have 4.5 and expecting to nearly double by the year 2040. As I mentioned with roadways about maintaining what we have a base of transit bus fleet here in our metropolitan area, and it will be important to be able to provide that transit service by also providing for state of good repair of the vehicles that we have out on the roadway. And so by 2040, we're projecting a need for about $30 million to keep our buses in a state of good repair. Transit has been on the front page a lot recently. We have efforts to bring passenger rail service to the Quad Cities. There's been a lot of communities interested in transit-oriented development, meaning that in the more dense areas of the community, let's develop mixed use so that it will be more attractive where people can live and work in the same place and be be able to use transit locally for their service needs. The loop is another asset that we have recently, and it's a circulator that runs along the riverfront in the evenings, generally in the times of day where traditional public fixed route service isn't available. So that's been fairly successful. Similar to the roadways, the priorities are, again, to maintain what we have and emphasize what our priority corridors are. And those are our key east-west and north-south routes, where if we can improve the land use and generate more dense developments in those areas, there's more ability and opportunity to provide transit. There's also interest. Metro is developing a new maintenance facility, and then Davenport is also looking at that to put it with their public works facility. Nearing the end of the presentation here, we've talked about passenger transportation. Freight is also a component about moving our goods and services in our metropolitan area. Again, going back to the supporting our economic vitality. So there's a number of initiatives that a variety of our different modes of transportation are undertaking. I'd already mentioned the overpass at Kelowna to reduce the conflicts between the rail and the road. The Quad Cities would like to pursue dollars to examine what commodities we might be able to bring in and out of our area, and look at what those opportunities might be. And then improving our lock and dam systems, increasing the guide walls so that the congestion on the river can move more smoothly as well. A number of other things would be to integrate, again, that technology component. Many of you, if you've traveled on the interstate systems, have seen the way in motion, where the cameras are on the interstates, and rather than the freight semis pulling off the roadway, they can continue to go through, and it's a billing system where their freight is basically billed as a way in motion. This is the network that we have here in our metropolitan area. The green are the motor freight terminals. The river dark dots are the river miles here. And then you've got your freight, your barge terminals. The purple are the industrial areas and the industrial parks. So again, in the last slide, it talked about making sure that the turning radii at the industrial parks is sufficient, and that the movement of goods and services in and out of our area is the most efficient as possible. And part of that is just maintaining the roads themselves. If they're in a state of good repair, that makes the shipping much easier than if it were not. One of the last chapters of the plan, Chapter 8, talks about what are the environmental types of impacts that need to be looked at. One of the things that have been added to this plan from past, again, it's a plan update, is the idea of climate change. And whether you believe climate change is a result of our human activity or not, we've seen more severe weather events in the last few years. And how can we build more resilient structures? How can we provide a redundant system to get people around if, in the event of a natural disaster, our system is a little more robust to be able to handle that? Flooding, for example, building the structures higher so that they won't get flooded. So that is kind of a quick, fast overview of a document that's taken 2 years to aware, our Transportation Technical Committee meets next week to review any public input that we've received to date and discuss any refinements of the plan. Our Transportation Policy Committee, as I mentioned at the beginning, is on June 21st. They'll hold a public hearing as part of this process. And then our board by State Regional Commission will consider adopting the plan the next day on June 22nd at our meeting at 3:30. So I'd be happy to take any questions or invite you to go around and look at the boards. Our staff are here to answer any of those questions that you might have. I can also go back to a slide if you had a question related to that. Our bridges. Yeah.
Actually, put together Is there still any talk about a bridge between Moline or East Moline and Bedford?
In the plan, we do have what we call illustrative projects, and those are projects that we haven't identified funding for. So a East Mississippi River Bridge is discussed, but wouldn't be considered part of the fiscally constrained plan. But if in the next 5 years before this plan is updated, funds are identified and there's a groundswell to build another bridge beyond I-74, that could be amended into the plan. I-74 again is the highest priority, so an East Mississippi River Bridge is probably not likely in the next 20 years, I would say.
How about East Rock River Bridge?
East Rock River Bridge is in the same category. It's shown as an illustrative project. There hasn't been any concept engineering done on the project yet, so that would be the first step, is to look at where it might be most feasible. There is lots of interest in developing that particular area of the Quad Cities has a number of environmental issues as far as crossing a river and habitat and wetlands. So it will probably be a fairly challenging project.
And on something like that, how do you elevate those type of projects?
The first step would be like what we've suggested on the freight side is a study. So generally, if there's enough interest through chambers of commerce or the local governments, or the governments in that vicinity. So for example, with the East Rock River Bridge, it might be Kelowna, Coal Valley, Rock Island County that partner together. I want to go back to an example that's been on the books, and it's still what would be considered an illustrative project, is there's a corridor south of the Quad Cities. It's Illinois 194. Moline, Rock Island County, I think Coal Valley all participated in a study, an alignment study basically of that south corridor. And so now they have a preferred alternative that's been identified. They've got some initial costs, and the next step would be to do another engineering study on more detail to get refinement of what those costs would be. So similarly, an alternative study on what would be the best place to put a crossing. And then the next step would be to do a little bit more engineering so that you have more solid costs in hand to be able to pursue federal, state, local dollars. So again, Indian Bluff Road is planned eventually here. Kind of the extension of Andalusia Road is a corridor that's been identified for some different types of development. And there definitely is some growth pressure, but out here, go back. You know, right now, when you look at employment, not a lot, you know, there's deer out here, not a lot out here. There is a little bit more development out in Kelowna these days, and so growth is occurring on the east side of the Quad Cities. So maybe, you know, in the next 10, 15 years, there might be enough development pressure in that area that might warrant a crossing for the East Rock River Bridge. And conditions right now, funding at the federal level is fairly stagnant. So we've actually projected revenues at a fairly low rate. And then hopefully after the year 2020, we'll see the conditions improve to be able to secure some more money.
You know, the John Deere Road expansion, will they put sidewalks and crossings in for that?
As part of our complete streets policy, they need to consider that. One of the things that they're looking at is there an alternative accommodation nearby, so maybe on the frontage roads in that area that they could put a parallel corridor, so it's not directly next to the 6 lanes.
Sure, but is there a way to get across it? That's the bigger issue.
They'll need to look at potentially pedestrian islands, again, because a 6-lane facility is so large. Generally, if a robust walker can maybe make it halfway and all the way across, but anybody that has some sort of impairment would have some difficulty. So generally they design kind of a pedestrian island in the center to be able to make it in a couple of jumps across. But that is something that is part of that complete streets, is looking at some north-south corridors. Our trail system is pretty good east-west, but one of the things that we'd like to do is improve a few more north-south connections, and what you're talking about is that improvement too.
So, but they already had the plan done for John Deere Road on the 6 lanes? I mean,
John Deere Road, they've got the preliminary designs done. I don't think they've gotten to the construction design yet. And I know, I think Lillette, you had attended the John Deere Road presentation, and that was preliminary design.
I was close to final design now.
Okay.
We were going to start construction in next season. You talked about the expanding.
The extent, yeah.
Right.
So depending on the funding availability, they're already well on their way. And that meeting was this last fall.
Yeah.
So we don't know if they have cross stuff in there.
Well, they had sidewalks, pretty good, like over 8 to 10 feet sidewalks, pedestrians. There was some concerns that some of the intersections which has a high volume traffic with a higher speed, and how the pedestrian can cross from one side to the other side of the streets. So they are considering some sort of redesigning certain intersections so they have enough staging area between the eastbound, westbound flows. So I think the goal was to have that as a complete street project. That was their main goal, for that John Deere expansion.
Anything else? All right. We do have the form, so if you do have any additional input on the plan is up on our website and available for public review. There is a